Yeah, Chair, Betty, thanks. I would like to start by thanking the Education and Training Service Center for the warm welcome and for hosting this important event on validation. What a great opportunity to be able to be here in person after more or less 2 years without any physical events. It's very much a welcome change, in my view. We are able to gather here in Iceland, a country that's always been considered a valuable CEDEFOP partner. And I have to tell you, because often in the EU speak, we say it's the EU 27 and Norway and Iceland. And it always sounds as if Iceland were like an also-ran. But no, Iceland, for me at least, is a member of the family, and family members stand by one another. And in the next few minutes, what I'm trying to attempt is to highlight the role and importance of validation vis-à-vis some of the major trends in the future of the world of learning and the world of work. So think lifelong learning, the green and digital transition, think skills mismatch, think reskilling and upskilling for workers, migration, and not least the tragic refugee crisis in recent years, and most notably maybe the one triggered by Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. We all learn constantly, but most of what we learn in non-formal and informal settings outside the formal education institutions is not certified. And therefore, if there is a certificate, then the learning outcomes associated with it are often not really visible, and also their value is not transparent, and hence it makes it difficult for people in society to capitalize on these certificates. This is where validation comes in. Validation has been a key part of our work for over 2 decades, and is also mentioned in CEDEFOP's founding regulation. In 2000, our colleague Jens Bjørnavold published Making Learning Visible, that has since become a seminal report on validation in Europe. And subsequently, CEDEFOP has been working closely with the Commission on validation and has collaborated with UNESCO, with the ILO, on advancing the field. The Making Learning Visible report also paved the way for other Commission initiatives, such as the 2004 European Principles, the first European inventories on validation, and the first edition of the European guidelines in 2009. Since 2012, CEDEFOP has continued its support to the implementation of the recommendation by updating the European guidelines on validations of non-formal and informal learning. In fact, and as you may know, we are working now on yet another update to which many of you have thankfully contributed. In addition to research and collecting evidence, we value and encourage debate and exchange of experience. The CEDEFOP a conference on validation in Thessaloniki in 2016 established an informal community of practice that supports and advocates for the development of validation arrangements in Europe as a follow-up to the first Biennale in Rotterdam in 2014. Since then, other conferences events have made this community of practice grow and gain momentum. In 2019, CEDEFOP contributed to the organization of the 3rd VPL Biennale in Berlin, already mentioned here today, hosted by the Bertelsmann Foundation. The pandemic has made it difficult to maintain and expand the community of practice because face-to-face interactions is, I believe, essential for building common understanding of validation challenges and for building trust. This is why this Biennale is so important for the validation community. CEDEFOP's work on validation from the very beginning recognized the importance of putting the individual center stage. This is even more important in the current context, where validation should be seen as a driver of transitions and of skills development, because it makes all learning visible and attaches value to it, no matter where, how, or when it was acquired. Please allow me to make 5 important points. First, validation supports the green transition. Becoming greener will bring about such profound changes in technology, in design, in production, services, consumption, and investment that it will be impossible to achieve without sufficiently skilled people. Our own skills forecast analysis shows that the transition to a greener economy has to be built on existing skills of current workers. In polluting sectors, large groups of workers will need to transition to greener jobs. Validation makes visible what they have learned over the years through their work practice. Secondly, validation also supports the digital transition. The COVID crisis has accelerated long-term trends in the use of technology. First findings from CEDEFOP's second European Skills and Jobs Survey show that 9 out of 10 workers use digital technology in their work. And at the same time that 52% of EU adults have a digital skills gap. Such skills gaps are often addressed via non-formal and informal learning, and learning by doing. If we manage to make these skills visible and somehow certify them, they will be better utilized and become drivers of change. Thirdly, validation helps address skills mismatch. We know from our first European Jobs and Skills Survey that a considerable share of the working population already possesses the skills needed in their job, even if these are not evident from their formal qualifications. There's also a large invisible stock of skills available in the workforce of many, and many employees find themselves in jobs that do not make use of their full potential. Validation helps to tap those potentials and helps people access better matching and hence more fulfilling jobs. Fourth, validation plays a key role for up and reskilling. Validation is one of the 3 steps in the upskilling process as devised by the European Commission. It is also a key tool to make education and training systems more flexible and permeable so that learners do not find themselves in dead-end roads. Think Betty's perfect example that she just mentioned before. Validating learning outcomes can shorten study duration or provide credit exemptions that makes education systems efficient and more effective. As a learner-focused process, validation also helps tailor training to individual needs and prevents people from having to spend time in training for things that they already know. Young people also benefit from validation. It makes visible their invisible and untapped skills, in many cases transversal ones, often those that employers are desperately looking for. And lastly, validation can help in integrating migrants and refugees. The tragic events in Ukraine are showing us the harsh reality of what it means to be displaced. The people fleeing the war need to be integrated in the EU labor market as fast as possible. And while many of us and the refugees themselves first thought this may be short and they may be able to return swiftly, I fear we're in for a long haul here. So tapping into their existing skills, validating not only their formal qualifications, but also their informal and non-formal learning will be fundamental. I know that all of you are aware and convinced of the importance of validation in creating truly flexible and accessible lifelong learning systems. It's the tragedy of speaking to the converted. At the same time, it is important to signal that validation needs to work together with other policies and services. Validation cannot work in isolation. It needs to be connected to other skills formation policies, as Minister Gulbrandson quite rightly said in his video address. Therefore, the main theme of this event is how validation processes become an integral part of policies and services to support lifelong learning. This is easier said than done, and there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. At CEDEFOP, we have been working for some time to understand the ways in which validation can connect with other services and support structures, such as, for example, career guidance and financing adult learning. Our work on learning outcomes and qualifications highlights the way in which national qualifications frameworks can connect learning across different contexts. Our ongoing study on micro-credentials will be important to understand how these forms of certification might influence validation practices. And it is through conferences like this one, through networking and learning from one another, that we advance the field and that we can jointly imagine, innovate, and implement solutions that will work for citizens. Thank you so much.